Welcome everyone to the Karina Loren Show. Today I have a very, very special guest. Not only is she my grandma, she is also a retired librarian and a bit of an expert on genealogy and ancestry, which is very important to me as I dig through my own family tree. So I'd like to step off the stage and welcome Catherine Whiteley. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here, not only because you're my grandma, but because you are a very special guest. And our viewers may not know this, but I have been relying on you quite heavily with regards to my path with discovering ancestry and my genealogy. And actually, you've done a ton of the heavy lifting yourself. You're a librarian, you're doing your thing, and in comes genealogy. How did you end up jumping over to that? Was it a hobby at first? Did something pique your interest?
No, actually, my own family had, I thought, quite a good record of who we were and where we came from. So I didn't think about it very much. And then I married your grandfather. And I was astonished, horrified, that he couldn't even name more than one grandparent. He did not know their names, his grandparents. I thought, how can that be? Because my grandparents and my uncles and aunts and they sort of were my backbone. They were the foundation of my life, and how he could not know them. And I felt so sorry for him. And then when I gathered that he didn't even really want to know, that he somehow thought that there wasn't anything very good to know about them. I don't know. I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Every person has a story, and a good one. They may not be illustrious, but I have researched so many very common people with wonderful stories. And I wanted your grandpa to have a family, not just be a little only boy, which he was, an only son, but with reams of family behind him, giving him support to take him through life, because that's what I find my research into ancestry gives me. I feel the support of all those people who went before. So, first birthday after I married him, I gave him a big book, which was like a gigantic family tree. And I said, this is my pledge. I am going to give you your family. And that's what started me off.
Wow, I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
I
So for the
I
next 20 years, that's what I did.
I love what you said about the strength of your ancestors, and also you had said something to me at some point about having two deaths, and I like that quote.
Yes, how did it go? You die once in your physical body, but your second death is the last time somebody remembers you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's sort of a motivation for me, is to bring people up. Right now, I'm looking on my great-great-great-grandmother's story. And I'm discovering things that I don't think anybody has really put together about her life, by finding this little piece and that little piece, and making a story out of it. And I thought, I feel like I am giving her a new life, that she won't be forgotten, that all of her descendants, and there must be many, 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 their great-great-grandmother is not gone and forgotten. She still lives in the story.
I love that. And I mean, obviously the viewers aren't going to know, but I know that the level of detail you've been able to get on people who are long since gone, it's astonishing.
Well, it is interesting. Right now,
Yeah.
with this great-great-grandmother, she was born 1794. I have learned that as an orphan girl, she somehow emigrated from Poland to Russia before she was 20. I don't know yet who she traveled with or how, but so I have found her in a a home of a minister who has, all his children had died young, and he's taken in her and a little boy age 7, given them a home. So this is interesting little picture of this young girl with no parents, no family, and this older minister and his wife taking them in and giving them a home.
Wow. So not to jump right into the deep end, I'm thinking more on the just, okay, I'm starting to dip my toe in. How would you recommend a person get started digging into their genealogy? What's the path of least resistance that you could start?
Well, it's really important just to gather up what you have. You may have a lot more than you know, but a lot of genealogy is putting things together. I'm amazed sometimes I can have so many pieces of information and all tells me nothing. But you start putting pieces together, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. So gather up what you have, and you start with things like certificates, birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, because they all have sort of the building blocks to start building your family. Find old pictures, especially if they have names on the back, which is so wonderful, but doesn't always happen. And old letters often give clues. And all of these things will start you on clues. And as soon as you start just with yourself. So you don't start looking for your great-great-grandmother from 1794. You start with Karina, and you put down your details, which you know. But then you'll be surprised which details about your parents you don't know. Thought you did. And all of a sudden there's gaps. But you can ask them. Then grandparents, if they're still alive, you can ask them. You start to build backwards. So you start with the things you already have. Of course, some people have very little, and some people have boxes of family memorabilia. So we're not all the same in that regard. But then when you start having a start, then you can go to, there's some great resources on the internet to help you start building that tree. But you always have to be so careful that you're not just copying some other people's mistakes. So that's important to get the background as accurately as you can from documents that you have. And when I first started with your grandfather, I sent for his father's birth certificate because that would be facts. Because he never really believed his own father very much. He always questioned him. So I got the birth certificate, and it had the wrong date on it for his father's, your grandfather's father's birth. It had the wrong father's name. So I actually threw it away. I didn't throw it away, but I stopped doing it for a while. I thought, if I can't even get this to work out right. But in fact, that birth certificate was wrong. And I found a document that was many, many years later, where your great-grandfather had gone to a judge to explain the fallacies in this birth certificate and what the real truth was.
That is I mean, how does this even happen? How do you get a completely false birth certificate?
Well, you can, because when I looked at it, who gave the information? See, when you're doing genealogy, you always look where did the information come from? And in case of your great-grandfather's birth, the information came from his stepsister. She was the one that went to the neighboring town where she had to register the birth. Now, why she got it wrong, I don't know. The birth date was only one day off. So, name of the father, I have never been able to rationalize why the name of the father was wrong.
Wow. That's too funny.
So actually analyzing your data, who it came from or where it came from. I had researching another ancestor of yours I found her in 10 censuses. So in every census, you tell your age. She died at almost 100. So she lived through a lot of censuses.
Wow.
And I could not get the right age out of her. I could not find the correct age.
What, did she just have it different for each census?
Well,
Like that didn't make sense?
Sometimes just the census taker would say, what age are you this year? And sometimes they'd ask, what age were you at your last birthday? And then when she got really old, I think that I'm wondering who talked to the census taker. I'm thinking it was her son that she lived with. And maybe he didn't really know. And in the end, I concluded that maybe she didn't really know, because she was born to illiterate parents in a log cabin, Eastern Ontario. I thought, well, how did they keep track of the day baby was born? Would they have a calendar? If they can't read and write, would they have a calendar?
Yeah, that's, I'm actually glad that you brought this up, because I've been doing quite a lot of research, and sometimes I find conflicting data, and it can be very confusing, where I start to think, is this the wrong person over here? Is something off? Because it can be so subtly different. Like maybe it's a day different in the birth date.
Sometimes there's a reason for it, and it's just the way it is. Sometimes it is the wrong person. Yeah, you have to really don't throw away discrepancies. Keep them in front of you and work with them.
And this, I hadn't thought of this question until right this second, when I realized it is so much data. Do you have a technique that you like to use to organize all of this? Do you keep it in a binder, or?
Well, there are many methods. Number one, I have a family tree program that I put all the data in. So that keeps track of who's who and who was married to who and who had what children and so on. So there is that electronic record. But as well as that, my preference is to have a file folder for each person.
Okay.
And the file folders have a numerical code, so I can find things easily.
Surprise, surprise, the librarian has a numerical code.
So for your family, I think the numbers go up to about 480. And that would
80 people?
But that doesn't, sometimes the brothers and sisters, like the brothers and sisters don't get their own folders. They go with their parent, and only the one that's your direct ancestor gets a folder.
Wow, that's a lot.
But they're all, every brother and sister has a numerical code as well.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, I know we've discussed this before. I can get really into it, and then I start to get like brain drain, where, okay, I've been working at this jigsaw puzzle for 2 hours. I need to stop.
Yes, that's very true. Sometimes you do. And with the great-great-grandmother I'm working on right now, I had to stop because I found I had missed something, and it changed the story. So I thought I have to back right out of here, start all over again, find my way again, because I had her in the wrong village. Didn't work.
Now, as far as like, I'm not subscribing to any paid services. I have found services so far that have worked well, but is there anything that you do recommend in paid services and or in the unpaid services?
Right. Well, there's two sources that are always my first go-tos, one paid and one unpaid. And Ancestry is a paid service, although you can go to a public library and get it for free.
A public library? Any public library?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Oh, this is such a good tip.
And Family Search, which is the Mormon Church database, which is immense. Those two services I quite like because we have two kinds of data. You have to really remember that when you're using it. One is data from historical records, birth records, death records, railroad records, immigration records. And those are, by and large, reliable. They also have a lot of data, which is just other people's family trees. Those must be examined with great care.
So in other words, someone has entered their family tree. Okay.
Right. And they're very helpful, but they're also often wrong. So you have to, so those two services are great because they are so huge. And both of them are, Family Search is free at your own home, and Ancestry is free from any library. Now, I recently also subscribed to MyHeritage, which is another one. And I found to my surprise that I'm finding a great deal more of my European ancestors there. Ancestry and Family Search, well, Ancestry is quite North American and is pretty good with England, but for continental Europe, it does not have the coverage that MyHeritage has.
Yeah, that's actually was going to be one of my questions, because I am finding it difficult with European records. Like specifically, I'm focusing on Germany. Oh my goodness, never mind layering in trying to translate German handwriting on top of names that were often nicknames, like Fritz, for example, is just a nickname.
Yes.
Or maybe maybe it said Ferdinand, but they actually went by Fritz. So the documentation it's actually very difficult. And then, like you said, some of those services that I have been using aren't really great for that.
No, MyHeritage is better for the continental Europe, I have found.
Okay. What do you think about services like 23andMe actually getting your DNA examined and linking you up to possible family members?
Well, I have done that. I have done that with MyHeritage and with Family Tree Maker. So two services. And so I know a little bit about it. I'm not at all an expert. Don't start that way unless you're adopted and don't know anything. Right? As long as you know something, you start with the records you can find yourself. Because when I get a match from, say, Family Tree Maker, they say you've got a match, and so they show me a person who has X amount of shared chromosomes with me. Okay, they say it's possibly a second to fourth cousin. If they don't have a family tree linked to that data, there's no chance I'll be able to figure out how they're related to me. They have to have a family tree linked to it. Sometimes they have a family tree with 6 people on it. Well, that's no help. Right, 6 people, that'll be 4 grandparents and 2 parents. That doesn't go back far enough usually for these matches.
I see.
So you need to match your family tree with their family tree. There's a lot of work to do. You don't just suddenly say, oh, here's Joe and he's your 3rd cousin, or he's your uncle, or whatever. That's not how it works. They just say, here's a person that has so and so much shared genetic matter. I met somebody who knew that my brother had tested very close to her uncle with the Y chromosome test. That's a very accurate test. It absolutely identifies the male lineage. And so her uncle and my brother were closely matched. Now, that should have meant that they had the same last name, because my brother would have the same Y chromosome as his father, and his father and his father. It should be the same last name,
Yeah.
but it was totally different. Her uncle had a totally different name, which is a really big puzzle.
Yeah.
And actually, now she has done enough work to realize that her uncle did not have, that wasn't his real last name. So now we know her uncle, for some reason, took on that name, but he was really a penner, just like my brother.
Oh
But
my goodness.
which penner? Which of the penners in my family had a child that ended up in a Friesen family? We're
Yeah.
still working on it.
So
Now,
it's a mystery to both of you then. You don't know.
no, we've really been working on it. She knows for sure who that man's mother was, but that's not helpful. So we have to find which penner man was the father. And haven't quite got there yet. It's not easy. We know we're related, and we know approximately when. Like it goes back to about 1830, somewhere in there, when that man with the wrong name was born. Now, was he out of wedlock? Was there that kind of problem? Was he orphaned and a family took him in and gave them their name? There's probably other variations of why that happened.
Yeah. It's almost like you're a detective.
Oh, totally.
It's very
You have to
exciting.
build, you build a hypothesis, and then you either try to prove or disprove it.
Do you think that it's beneficial to travel to the source? So, for example, person A was born in Whitehorse or they got married in Whitehorse, let's say, for example, but I can't find anything. I can't find records for what happened to this person, where they came from. Would Whitehorse, the source of this, have more records than what I can find online?
Probably, but you could also we'll use Whitehorse. You could contact the Whitehorse archives
Oh,
and
that's a
ask them, do you have any files with this family, about this family? You could, depending on how far back this goes, high school yearbooks that might only be available at that high school. So sometimes there's local material, and you sometimes can get somebody to look it up for you. I am a great fan for emailing and phoning people like librarians in small towns. I say, this is the family I'm interested in. Do you have any files in the library about that family? And very often they do. So archives and libraries are good places just to, out of the blue, phone them or email them and ask them if they have files. It's amazing the kind of files that small towns keep about their local people.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And sometimes, I've seen handwritten little stories that are just fabulous stories that came out of archives on slips of paper. And they're still in the archives on slips of paper written in pencil.
Wow. Is that how you have also been able to curate so much of a story?
The records tell you the facts, but the story part is the part that you really want to end up with, isn't it? Things that the person said or did, even if they're just anecdotes. Something that you can hang on to a person, like the man that I was researching in Parksville, who it said that he swam in the ocean every day of the year. And he was a pioneer there in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I found a story where somebody said that his sister was so curious about this story that she went out and caught him going out for his swim. And it was not true. He did not go in air buff. He wore his wife's pantaloons.
I was gonna say his sister was curious, or his sister wanted to prove he wasn't actually doing what he said he was doing.
Whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So
so
that's a
funny.
funny little story that I found in the archives.
Oh my goodness. It's just fascinating. I love this tip. I mean, where it's not going to help me, I suppose I could call archives or a library in Germany in different small towns I'm looking in.
You're going to find language a problem.
Darn it. Oh, okay. Well, translator then. Yeah, I also find with the German documentation, there is some lettering
Oh,
issues. Like, oh my goodness, that's tough. I do have on my phone where I can take a picture of the document and use Google Lens to do translate, which is an unbelievable technology because it just takes the image that you have on your phone and puts it in English.
wow.
Yeah, it's really been very, very helpful, but it struggles too sometimes with I mean, some old handwriting from the 1800s can be hard enough in English.
Yes.
And then you put it in German and it's like, is that an F? Is it an R? What is this?
I know they had a different script.
Yeah. So
I'm
like
struggling with that too.
it's like you said, it's just a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So I mean, I am fortunate. I could probably bring the documents to Nanny. So my other grandma who speaks German, she may be able to assist there.
I have been surprised. I have some older, even older than me, German friends, and some a little bit younger that live next door to me. And they don't know how to read that script. I learned it when I was a child, but it's almost gone, the ability to read it. I have on occasion, I found a document that was the sort of the program for my grandparents' wedding, and I couldn't read it. I actually need somebody to translate it.
What was it in English or?
No, it was in German script.
Oh, it was in German script.
Yeah.
From when?
1910.
So who did you pay to translate it?
Well, I contacted an archivist. Said,
Yeah.
"Do you know any old German person that would do this for me?" And actually, he said, I said I'll pay him, but he said no, he won't take payment. So I gave the archives a little donation.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, that's another great tip because sometimes the barrier or the dead end is the language.
Yes. Yes.
And you're right. I mean, I have asked a young German friend, but I'm
They
obviously
don't.
not getting
They
anywhere
don't.
with that.
No, they with that script. Um, I know more than some of them, which is very little. I
Yeah.
actually I actually knew how to write it at one time.
Really?
Yeah. I went to German school every Saturday morning.
Okay, that's exciting. So can you still speak it a little bit?
Yeah. Oh yes. I should tell you about my was a question you were asking earlier about a recent long lost relative that I met through searching.
Yeah.
So I have become acquainted with a second cousin whose name is Svetlana. And as you might guess, she was born in Central Russia. And her language of choice is Russian. But she has, when the Soviet finally opened the doors and allowed people out, she emigrated to Germany. So she has learned some German. Her German is better than mine. So now we have been connected, but her language is Russian, my language is English, and we both know a smattering of German. So how do we correspond? And we've now exchanged about half a dozen letters each. And they're long, long letters. She told me that she writes the letter to me in Russian. Then she gets out her dictionary and she translates it into German. Then she posts it by snail mail because she doesn't have internet. Then I finally get it. I have a German letter, which I can mostly read, but I usually do end up translating it into English so I can read it more quickly. Then I write an English response, and I put it into Google Translate and send her the result after I've tinkered with it a little bit, because sometimes it's not very good. And that's why I don't use Russian, because then I wouldn't even know if it wasn't translating well. With the German, when I put it through Google Translate, I can tell when they got it wrong.
Okay. This
So
is,
then I send her by snail mail my answer.
how fun. You have a pen pal.
I have a pet no.
I just said to the kids today, I said, when we go on our trip, are you hoping to connect with someone that you could become pen pals with? I said, I guess they don't really have pen pals anymore. It's just Instagram. But having a pen pal is so exciting.
Well, that's the thing that they don't get out of Instagram. Svetlana writes me a letter. It's beautiful handwriting, and it's always very closely written, 4 pages. So she puts a lot into it. And the most amazing thing is that, and she said it, and I have said it independently, we feel like we've found a soulmate. The things she says are so poignant, so real to me. Just things about life and how she feels about things. And, we've had a totally, totally different life. Her grandfather was put into a Soviet gulag, and he almost died there. He came home, but he died shortly after. Her father was a Russian and fought in the Second World War in the defense of Poland. She had uncles and aunts that were taken to concentration camps in Russia. Her grandmother died in one of those. So, I mean, her life and mine have not been similar in any way. And yet, we have such a bond. On her third letter, because she doesn't tell me very much about herself, on her third letter, she revealed to me that she was a librarian.
Oh.
I thought, of course.
Of course she is. What?
She told me an interesting story when she was 16. That was the age at which she could have her personal identity card in Russia. And she had to identify what nationality she was. And her father is Russian, her mother is German. And she told her mother that she's going to call herself German. And the mother said, I don't think you should do that. And Svetlana had said, well, my father has given me my name, his last name, and he named me Svetlana, which is a Russian name. And you have given me, I have nothing of you, so I'm going to call myself German. And the mother says, be very careful. This may come back to haunt you. 2 years later, she finished high school and she applied. She wanted to go to university to study history and archives. I mean, this feels like me. Anyway, so there were only 2 universities in Russia that had those specialities. One was in Leningrad and one was in Moscow. Because her father was very familiar with Leningrad, she wanted to go somewhere that he had some familiarity with. She came from a very small village in the middle of Russia. So she's applied. She'd always had top grades all through school. She applied to this university. And after a long, long delay, she just had the application sent back to her. And where she had written down German as nationality, they had taken a red pen, drawn big rings around it. That was their explanation. Don't come to us.
No. Oh my gosh.
Such a different world she lived in.
No kidding.
After she explained all this, she said, this letter is getting too long. She says, I'll quit here. And so now I still don't know how she got to be a librarian.
And you're like, no, don't quit now. It's Again, it's like back in the day where you'd have to wait for the next episode to come out.
It's just like that. No screaming with this girl.
No streaming. You have to wait. So, so how did you find her?
Well, this is a really good, good little example. I was trying to research my grandfather's sister. I know what happened to her because he never knew what happened to her. It bothered him his whole life long. She did not make it to Canada. So I knew that she had lived in a colony in Russia called Fürstenland. I thought, well, I can't even find information about Fürstenland. So I'm just going to Google it. So I did. I just put Fürstenland, which is the name of the colony. And I came across a website it originated in Manitoba that had oodles of photographs, including photographs of that great aunt of mine. So that was pretty wonderful. So I thought, well, if she's got photographs of my great aunt, then she must have information about the family. So I found out who was the webmaster and I emailed her. And she said, well, yes, she says, I can tell you what I know, but I'm really related to the other side of that family. But you should talk to Tina Isaac. She came from the other side of the family, which is your side. I didn't know any Tina Isaac, or that I had a cousin called Tina Isaac, but I contacted her and she says, oh, yes, she said, I wrote a whole book, my father's story. That would have been my mother's cousin, first cousin, about his life in Russia, when he came to Canada, his life in Canada. And so we set up a little pen pal arrangement with Tina Isaac, and I've been writing with her for several years. One day she sent me a letter and saying, we have a mutual cousin called Svetlana, and she's very shy, and I don't know whether she will write to you, but I told her she should, because you know more than I do about the family. And sure enough, Svetlana did write to me. And so by following up a wild Google inquiry, I found the second cousin in Manitoba, who then connected me to the one in Germany.
Wow.
It's connections like that.
Pulling on the thread, contacting people, and just asking. I mean, what's the worst they're going to say is, I have no idea.
Yeah, and I got quite a few of those too.
Yeah. And I mean, the question that I'm dying to know is, do you feel like you accomplished your mission? Did Grandpa feel like, I have this backing of family behind me?
You know, one of the most wonderful outcomes of tracing his family, and one of the most difficult, was tracing his second great grandfather, whose name was George Forbes. This is a part of the Whiteley family. And George Forbes was really, really a difficult task, because he had such a unusual life, actually. He was born in Scotland. I still don't know where. But when he was about 15, he joined the Cameron Highlanders. And his first assignment was to go to France, keep the peace, because Napoleon had just been defeated.
Oh my gosh.
And so there he was in Paris, keeping the peace after the defeat of Napoleon. Then he had met many other assignments before he eventually was assigned to Quebec City, which is where he met the woman he married. So that's where your great, I think about 5 greats grandmother was born, in the garrison in Quebec City. But proving that was the right man, that was the trouble. Because the person that I could connect to was the farmer that lived in Ontario. Now I had to prove that the soldier and the farmer were the same guy.
Okay.
And that was really very difficult. But when I did that, and that's the picture that I wanted you to show.
Let's show it right now as you're speaking.
Okay. So here on the right, we have your grandfather in his very proudly wearing his Calgary Highlanders uniform. He loved being in the Calgary Highlanders and he was very proud of it. But on the left is a picture of a sergeant in the Cameron Highlanders in 1815, which is the year that his great-grandfather joined the Cameron Highlanders. So this picture, this juxtaposition of pictures is Donald Whiteley, meet your great-great-grandfather. Both of them Highlanders. The one on the left is actually a sergeant, which is exactly what George Forbes became. So that would have been his working outfit for 20 years of his life.
Wow. Was Grandpa a Highlander before he knew this?
Oh, yes.
Seriously?
This was so exciting for him because that meant so much to him.
Oh my gosh, I love this connection that he did that, had no idea. Wow. I mean, that's a really cool story to have that connection where it's just, okay, there is a past, there is a family behind me.
I found so many wonderful stories from him. You know, like just so many events in Canadian history that your family took part in. Well, you may have in school learned about the formation of the RCMP. They were the Northwest Mounted Police to start with.
Yeah.
A little contingent of 100 of them marched across the prairies, keeping the peace, and ended up in Fort Macleod and Fort Calgary and Fort Edmonton, building those forts to keep the peace. Well, your I don't know how many greats uncle was one of those 100.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness.
He was there building Fort Calgary.
Yeah. And this is my goal through the paternal and maternal lines, is to have some kind of idea, not just name, birth date, death date,
totally.
something, a
almost
tidbit.
A waste of time. You want some story to go with these people.
Yeah.
There's only one story.
Exactly. And it's, I mean, like you said, with your 480 file folders, it's a lot of string, because you look at one person and it's like, okay, I've got the basics, but now the work begins.
And the fun, really.
Yeah, it's true. I actually love it. My end goal is to have this beautiful, almost not photographic, but an artistic walk through the ancestry line that I can pass down.
Yes. And, you know, sometimes it could just be a picture of a village they came from.
Yeah.
In the case of one of your ancestors, John Davidson, his tombstone is famous because Margaret Lawrence named one of her novels after it. It's Stone Angel.
What?
Stone Angel is your family tombstone.
Oh my goodness.
It's very beautiful. You should look it up on the internet. It's a very beautiful tombstone.
I will.
Of an angel.
I have one more question to ask that I forgot to ask, and it's important because I think it's a difficult one when there's such a common surname like Robson or Smith, for example. I mean, where do you even go? I think you already probably answered it by just going down your family line and asking the people who are already, who may know.
Yes, that's an important point. It's hard. It's hard with people with very common names.
Yeah. And there's so many too. It doesn't help that in my son's family line, it's like James Robson, Lauren Robson. Like these are not, you could get hundreds, thousands of them. So
my ancestry line, if you looked at my male ancestry line. Great. There was a Heinrich Penner. His son was Heinrich, and then his son was Heinrich, and then the next one that I was related to was Cornelius. And then the next one was Heinrich, and then my father was Cornelius. For 6 generations, they had only 2 names.
Remind you of anyone? Lorimer?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It almost looked though like back then that was common. Even looking down the German family line, there's a lot of Anna, and then Anna's the middle name, and then.
Well, that's an interesting thing to point out, though. In some nationalities, the Scottish people especially, but I think the Germans did it too. My family certainly did it, and that is naming patterns. Are you familiar with naming patterns?
Well, explain it anyways, because I'm just guessing what it means.
Okay. Commonly, especially with the Germans, an oldest son would be called after his paternal grandfather, but sometimes the father, but often the paternal grandfather. And the first girl would be named after the maternal grandmother. Second son would be named after father. Second daughter would be named after mother. And then after that, it would be after uncles and aunts quite a.
Okay, I've never heard that. That's really interesting.
So when I'm trying to puzzle out this this great grandmother that I'm working on, I was very confused that her first son was called Jacob. But that wasn't her husband's name, and it wasn't her husband's father's name, which would have been the 2 choices that one would guess. So I'm wondering if Jacob was her father's name, and she was honoring the memory of her father that she lost. So that would be a clue. It's not a proof, but it's a clue that I should really look for a Jacob with her last maiden name. If I ever saw a Jacob Manhals, I would definitely try to see whether that was her father.
That's a really good one. I'm gonna have to rewatch this and take notes, because that's a good tip. Because you're right. Sometimes there's like I've known that certain people are orphans, or there's just a dead end. So that would help, keeping that in mind.
It could. Mm-hmm. Naming patterns are quite interesting, and they're never 100%. They're worth looking at.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, okay. I lied. Last question. Where, if you could dissect, maybe not the right word, dissect any family tree, famous, infamous, not famous at all, who would you choose?
I thought about that, and he's such an interesting example. And I picked somebody modern. I picked Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin, because here's a woman born in Pincher Creek, Alberta, who became the longest serving Chief Justice of Canada that we've ever had. The first woman to serve in that role. She's considered one of the greatest legal minds around. I thought, what made her what she is? Because that's what genealogy is all about. What are the factors that went into a person's life? That's what you think about when you're building a story. What made them who they are? What made them do what they did?
Oh, I love that. I love that. Sometimes I wish I could go all the way back. Like, I want to know who my relative was in 800 BC.
Yes.
Tell me what they were doing.
Exactly.
Just trying to survive.
And then when you think about my little experience with Svetlana, with his second cousin, seems to be echoing my thoughts, echoing my career path.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Oh, that is just such an incredible example of the fact that there could be there could be people out there that we're related to that we have no idea that are somehow
Soul,
following.
soul sisters.
Yes. What a thing of beauty. I love that you have this pen pal.
I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, I
Because
do.
I'm still waiting to find out how she became a librarian since the universities nixed her the first time she tried to go.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how did she? I mean, she must have done it in Russia, right? Because,
Yes, she
yeah.
lived in Russia until she was about 50.
Oh, that long. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, so definitely. Yeah, you're gonna have to keep me posted for sure. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really, really appreciated it. And there's so many tips that I might have to create like a little resource file for people to download because there's a lot there. You're just a wealth of knowledge. You're like
Awesome.
you know what you are? You're a library of knowledge. That's what you are. So thank you so, so much. And I'll let you know when it's live.
Okay, please do.